You're listening to Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories.
Whispering Spirit Under the Bed by Bo Bandy. In 1988, I rented an old wooden house with my then-wife. Sometime in the middle of the night, I was awakened by a very creepy noise which would alternate from a loud, irregular chanting to an almost whisper-like eerie hiss. It was like nothing I'd ever heard. The hair on the back of my non-believer neck stood completely on end. Frankly, I was freaking the F out and questioning my denial of the supernatural. I urgently woke up my wife, but communicated for her to say nothing and just listen. I wanted to make sure I wasn't imagining the whole thing or dreaming. In just a few seconds, her eyes grew as large as saucers, and I received my answer. She clearly heard it too, and was so terrified that she wasn't even able to speak at first. Finally, she summoned the courage to whisper to me, "What is that?" I shook my head in bewilderment. I had no explanation to give. The inhuman whisper didn't seem to be bothered at all by our awareness of it, and only the thundering beat of my heart partially drowned it out. It was very close to us. It sounded like it was less than 3 feet away, and as the man of the house, I was expected to investigate what it was. The hiss was actually coming from underneath our bed, specifically directly under my side. I didn't have a bedside table or lamp, so the only way to turn on a light was for me to get up and walk over to the wall switch in the dark. You can probably understand why I was hesitant to do that. A little light did filter in from the streetlight across the road through our curtained windows, but it wasn't very much, and not nearly enough to make me feel brave enough to investigate. Worse still, the ungodly whispering continued on, unabated. With courage, I finally dredged up from somewhere I'll never know. I leaned over and peered underneath the bed to confront the unknown source of our terror. Slowly, my eyes adjusted to the near-total darkness under the bed, and I made out what was haunting us. Each night we carried a glass jug of water to bed with us, so we didn't have to get up and go to the kitchen for a drink. One of those half-gallon-sized orange juice jars with a metal lid. I quickly surmised that the hiss and chanting was actually coming from that darn possessed jug. The metal lid wasn't screwed on completely, and trapped air was escaping out of the partially screwed-on lid. After realizing that our chanting ghost was actually just escaping air from a water jug, we had a good laugh, but it made me realize how brittle my disbeliever courage was. Less than a month later, I found myself with a nearly identical repeat of the situation, except I knew for a fact that we hadn't brought the water jug to bed with us. And this time the hissing was different, and sounded like a feral animal on the attack. Note, we didn't have any pets. Again, I awoke with my wife. She listened and heard the same close-by screeching, hissing noise that I did, and I didn't have to remind her that we left the water jug in the fridge. She remembered that too. We both stared at each other in the dark. The noise was angry and threatening. It was almost like a series of guttural growls and fiery hissing. This time it seemed to be a little farther away than the first time, but still incredibly close. I pulled back the curtain and looked outside. Nothing. My heart was racing. It was definitely coming from right outside the window, and yet there was nothing I could see out there. The street light lit up the yard well enough to see even our individual blades of grass, and yet the unexplained hissing continued. Finally, I stood up and put my face against the glass. When I peered down as sharply as I could, I was able to solve this mystery. 2 or 3 cats had cornered an opossum, and they were all having a hissing match near the side of the house. Only by directly looking down at an acute angle could I see them. In the dark, in the sterile stillness of the night, little unexplained things can seem like big unexplained things. Candace from Uber by Yearn to Learn. Although it sounds logical, always make sure that your rideshare is the vehicle on the profile you are paired with. Don't get into an unauthorized vehicle or with an unauthorized driver. If you're suspicious, call the company. Make sure the child lock is disabled if you can. My girlfriend recently was taking an Uber from my apartment to the Greyhound station because I wasn't feeling well enough to drive her to the station myself. She was paired with a woman named Jade who would arrive in a Ford Focus according to the Uber app. What showed up was a 6'3", 220-pound man in a new 4-door tan Cadillac, the sedan model. Neither of us were able to get the plate number, unfortunately. He had a short haircut and a tightly cropped beard, wearing a black pea coat. He looked like a typical enforcer type. I walked my girlfriend downstairs and then headed back into our apartment. The car was right outside. She goes out and doesn't see a Ford Focus. She sees the Cadillac. The man starts honking and gets out to shout "Uber" and tells her to get in. She hesitated and began to walk away, back towards the building, and he began to get out of the car and command her to get into the vehicle. She's at the side door near the dumpster and can't find her keys. She's frantically calling me to come let her in, and the doors of our apartment complex on both the front and side entrances lock behind you. Once I let her in, she started shivering and crying hysterically. She told me that the man got out of the car and followed her to the door. Somehow I got there just in time to let her in. Once we were inside our apartment, I locked the door behind us, not that it made all that much of a difference, considering he was locked out of the entrance. Then she started getting calls from a blocked number. She kept declining the call, and after the 10th time, I picked up and asked who it was. The guy claimed to be an Uber driver and that she needed to complete the ride or the app wouldn't let him leave. Uber was new to the area at the time, so whatever ring he was part of probably got a few uninformed people like us. I told him that's not how it works, canceled the ride and told him to leave. He kept insisting. I hung up and we got 12 more calls. I picked up again, this time in the most eerily fake female voice I've ever heard. The caller said, "Candace from Uber." It still gives me shivers thinking about that conversation. Candace said,
"This is Candace from Uber. We have a report of a female passenger refusing to get into a vehicle. She needs to get into the vehicle right now."
I demanded to speak to a manager and was told there wasn't one on the floor. I said, "Fine, put me on with any other coworker." I heard someone clear their throat, and this time a different male voice than the driver came on. He immediately knew the situation somehow and said the same thing that Candace did. I told them that they needed to tell the car outside the apartment to leave immediately or I was calling the cops. They insisted that she get into the car again, so I just hung up. We went out of the other exit to our building and I drove her myself. By the time I got back to the apartment, he was still outside. That's when I saw him well enough to give the description I did. Naturally, she reported it to Uber, and I gave the police a statement. I took a Lyft the next morning and told the driver on a whim. The driver confirmed the same thing happened with his girlfriend. Same guy, same tan Cadillac. However, he was with his girlfriend in the Uber. My Lyft driver asked him why his profile was incorrect, and the driver told him that the app makes mistakes sometimes. Suspecting something was up, his girlfriend texted him while he was in the car saying that she was afraid. My driver actually showed me the texts too. It was so bizarre. He also noted that there was a huge roll of saran wrap in the guy's back seat. Please, make sure you're safe in your rideshare. Verify it's the correct vehicle and driver, and do not get into the car with an unauthorized driver or vehicle. Make sure the child lock is disabled too, please. I couldn't imagine if something happened to my girlfriend. Be safe.